Hi there, the Story Ninja's back. But I have a special someone for you to meet today. Meet Fancy Nancy, who believes that more is always better when it comes to being fancy, from the top of her tiara down to her sparkly studded shoes. Nancy is determined to teach her family everything there is to know about being fancy. Are you ready? Fancy Nancy was written by Jane O'Connor. Some of you may have met her before, and she's just absolutely fancy. So let's see. This is Fancy Nancy's bedroom before she made it all fancy. Would you like to see what it looks like now? Hold on. I love being fancy. My favorite color is fuchsia. That's just a fancy way of saying purple. I like to write my name with a pen that has a plume. And that's just a fancy way of saying a feather. And I can't wait to learn French because everything in French just sounds so fancy. Let's have a look at Fancy Nancy with all her fancy little things. Well, nobody in my family is fancy at all. They never even ask for sprinkles. Can you imagine that? An ice cream cone without any sprinkles? There's a lot they just don't understand. Lace trimmed socks do help me play football better. Sandwiches definitely taste better when you stick in frilly toothpicks. And a princess is supposed to keep her tiara on, isn't she? Ah, what's a fancy girl to do? I ask my doll, Maribel. Her name is, listen to this, Maribel Lavinia Chandelier. Oh, what a fancy name. Ah, ping. Then I get an idea that is stupendous. That's a fancy word for great. Maybe I can teach my family to be fancy. So I'll make an advert and I stick it on the fridge. Good idea, don't you think? Soon there's a knock on my door. My family saw the advert and they want to get started right away. Oh my word, Fancy Nancy has started her own Let's Be Fancy workshop. I'm excited now and I think I'd like to go too. The trouble is, my family doesn't own any fancy clothes. Does yours? But that's okay. Oh wow. It's time for me to go and find. What is that fancy word? Oh, yes. All my accessories. Ooh la la. Now my family's absolutely posh. And that's a fancy word for fancy. Don't you think everybody looks absolutely fancy? My mom twirls in front of the mirror. Why don't we go somewhere fancy tonight? How about dinner at the King's Crown? Dad suggests. Whoa, my parents are being fancy already. May I escort you ladies outside? The limousine is waiting. By the way, my dad is our chauffeur. That's a fancy word for driver. When we arrive at the King's Crown, everyone looks up. They probably think we are movie stars. How fancy is that? I am so proud of my whole family. They eat with their pinkies up and call each other darling. Fancy Nancy and a very, very fancy family. For dessert, let's have parfaits, my mom says. That's French for ice cream sundaes. Amazing! My mom knows French. So when our parfaits are ready, I curtsy and say, merci. And I'm sure you can guess that's French for thank you. So I carry the tray like a fancy waiter. Oops! I slip, I trip, and the tray has a double flip. Oh my goodness. I don't feel fancy anymore. I just want to go home. Poor Fancy Nancy has fallen with all the ice creams on top of her. Or excuse me, parfaits. After I get all cleaned up, I put on my peignoir. That's French for dressing gown. I feel much better. I'm ready for a parfait. I tell my parents, thank you for being fancy tonight. I love you, my dad says. I love you, my mom says. And all I say back is, I love you, because there isn't a fancy or better word of saying just that. So I hope you enjoyed our Fancy Nancy, and I do promise there are plenty more Fancy Nancies after this. So see you next time.